Hey everyone, it's Vanessa Callahan, and I'm so excited to welcome you to the Calm, Empowered Parent podcast. Together, let's challenge the idea that parenting has to be perfect. We know that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to raising children, and while love is the key, it sure helps to have the right tools for the job. Raising resilient humans is intensely personal and even transformative work, and I'm here for it. Let's laugh, cry, heal, and learn together. Here we go. My child is about to turn 3 and doesn't want to potty train. Oof, yeah. I'm getting nervous about the preschool requirement for my son to be potty trained in time. Help? Oh, okay, Alyssa, with your 3-year-old. So a child that doesn't want to potty train. So here's the thing. When we start to potty train, sometimes we go straight for it and kids respond well. Other times we have to take a more subtle approach because kids at 3 can take anything that they're being told to do as an initiation of a power struggle. And not just at age 3, but especially at age 2 and 3. And I would add, especially if it has something to do with their body. Because if you think about where do kids have the most power and control? It's over things that either go in or come out of their body, right? Whether it's food or potty, even just getting their face wiped, they have a lot of control over their body, right? Or whether they're going to take their clothes off to get in bath or not, that's where they tend to assert and we have a lot of power struggles. So the first thing I would do is try to do everything you can to connect before you direct, and make sure that you're kind of in this flow state of, hey, we're doing something together and I make suggestions and you try them and you make suggestions and I try them. And like, now we're going to do this thing, right? Now we're going to go sit on the potty and see. And let the routines be the boss as much as possible. So like, I don't want to go potty. Oh, I don't want to go potty either. But clock says 4:30 or whatever it is, right? And it is time to go sit on the potty so that we can get ready for the next thing, right? I have been in preschool environments as a consultant, but also as a teacher for 5 years, where potty training was alive and well. We were doing it every day, and also observing and supporting toddler teachers. And there is this sort of no nonsense, like, this is happening. This is part of the routine. And also they're taking the pressure off of producing pee and poop and instead make the routine about sitting and seeing. Let's go sit and see, or let's go to the toilet and see what happens. That can be really helpful because then you're not telling them that their body has to do a thing in terms of like letting go of urine, letting go of their bowel movement. You're just asking them to give the body a chance to possibly do something. And I would not make it wrong if you go and sit and see, and they're willing to at least do that and nothing comes out. Be like, okay, great. We sat and saw, and like, nothing's ready to come out. Okay. And then it could just be very gentle, very clear, like, okay, then we'll try again in about, before dinner or whatever. And let it be what it is. The other thing you can do is associate it with something really pleasant. And for a short period of time, you can do things like potty candy or little chocolate chips, those kinds of things. You can also really let them know and positively reinforce that it's so great that they're sitting and seeing by like reading them a book or singing them a song or playing a little game that they really like. All these things are really reinforcing and positive ways to associate this time. And really get away from repeating over and over again. Like, did you go pee? Did you go potty? Do you need to pee? Do you need to go? You're like, that starts to really set up that power struggle. I like to show in workshops, for example, I'll put my hand up and I just have another person put their hand against my hand and I just push. And naturally, 9 times out of 10 or more, the person pushes back and they don't give any ground, right? They push back. And I say, what are you doing? And they always look a little startled that I ask them because, I'm kind of putting them on the spot, and they're like, well, you pushed my hand, so I pushed back. So, yeah. So guess what happens when we give our kids something to push back on? They instinctively push and get very positional, right? They don't want to let go of their position. They don't want to let go of ground. So if they're not yet on the toilet and you're saying, it's time to get on the toilet, let's go, let's go, let's go, then what position can they hold? Not getting on the toilet, right? So I would smooth that out as much as possible. and less of a demand, more of a, this is what's happening, let's go. Okay. All right. And this fun thing happens when we get there. See what happens with that shift. And maybe though, Alyssa, this is something you've already tried and we need to dig deeper, and that's totally fine. I would recommend you possibly hop on my calendar and we could do it one of my 30-minute consults. It's a complimentary consult. And if you haven't had one in the last 6 months and you're at all open to being coached, consider hopping on my calendar and we can support you, or any of the people listening are welcome to go and claim a free complimentary parenting session where we'll go over some strategies and have you take the quiz and map out a learning plan for you as a parent, because I think parents deserve resources and insight into their development as much as our children and teachers do. It's kind of a missing piece that I like to offer in the community. And of course, we'll have a chance to see if it's a good fit to work together or have you hop into one of my programs with no obligation. Okay. So this is a question from Priscilla Brooks. Talking about being kind, her son seems to find enjoyment when he makes people around him unhappy, making his brother cry, or when he is unkind to us. Any suggestions? Oh, yes, for sure. Okay. Many of my clients have experienced this, and I've been having all these conversations with families who have at least one child who seems to get some pleasure out of getting either the parents or their siblings worked up. And so you're not alone, first of all, Priscilla. And if you have concerns about, oh my gosh, is my child being antisocial or something else, just know that you're not the only parent who's grappling with the trajectory of their child's social and emotional development around this question. So just take a breath into that first, I'd say. Not alone, Priscilla. One thing we want to do is understand, first of all, the science of empathy. So children on average, now think of like a bell curve, okay? The top of the bell curve, the peak of the bell curve in terms of age, when kids are able to literally do the mental exercise of taking another person's perspective, which is considered one of the most important elements of true empathy and empathizing, happens around 7.5. So with your 5-year-old, it's coming soon in terms of his mental gymnastics or ability to stretch all the way over and actually go, oh, I see why this isn't kind. Oh, I can imagine what it would feel like to be treated this way, and I'm not going to do it anymore. And so since he's 5, there's a little bit of consideration around his developmental readiness to truly empathize. However, we need to do more direct teaching and more direct pointing out of the evidence of his impact on others. And I would start to normalize that as a family, we are going to acknowledge impact, we're going to name impact, and we're going to address impact so that we can basically repair the impact we've had on others. I have a whole pillar on this in my quiz and in my programs, conflict resolution, and repair, because without it, hurt becomes more hurt, and it becomes a cycle. And kids, maybe even as young as 5, miss an opportunity to understand that they're having an impact on others. Now, I'm sure you've already tried some things like, your brother doesn't like that, or look, he's crying now. But what I want you to do is help him look for the evidence of his impact, and then help his brother, like by interviewing him or by guessing and having him nod, share an impact statement. And this is something I teach all my clients. So an impact statement or I message would be, I feel blank when you blank because blank, right? So I feel when you because, or just when. So I feel sad when you keep poking me, let's say, because I've asked you to stop and it seems like you think it's funny that I'm mad. And so if his brother is too young to use those words himself, you can still point it out to him. Oh my gosh, your brother doesn't look very happy right now. Look at his face, right? Look at his face is important. Look at his face. Is he smiling or frowning? No, he's frowning. Actually, he's crying. Why was he crying? Oh, when he cried when you kept poking him and he said, stop, I don't like that. And you kept poking him. So he is sad when you keep poking him. And you can look at the 3-year-old and be like, because he's not having fun anymore. And you kind of go like this, the 3-year-old like, yeah, okay. So if we keep poking him, he's going to make him sad and, feel probably unsafe and not want to play anymore. Shoot. And then you give a lot of attention to the 3-year-old. Sweetie, what do you need? Are you okay? Can I give you a hug? Should we take a break from your brother? And you basically want the attention to go to the impacted party first and mostly after you've shared the impact statement, and model what it's like to comfort when you've made a mistake. And then also perhaps make it so that the 5-year-old doesn't have access to the 3-year-old until the 5-year-old does something to repair, even if it's to just say, I'm sorry, or I'll stop, or I'm ready to be kinder with my hands, or play his brother's favorite game. Doesn't have to be I'm sorry, but something. And you can make it so that the 5-year-old has kind of has a boring time. Like, you go do interesting things with the 3-year-old. Oh, you can join us once you're ready to be kinder to your brother, and listen to his words could be a really good way to describe that. When you give them the opportunity to return and try again, doing the behavior that you would like to see instead, and also to repair, it does build in this thing that eventually you can refer to it and be like, are you really going to keep doing that to your brother and make him cry? Because you know what that means, right? I've done this with 5-year-olds, like kind of like, and I know, you know what that means, right? That means you're going to have to stop playing and take a break, and then come back when you're ready, and then, find a way to fix your mistake, and maybe not be able to join again until you're really ready. Is that what you really want to do right now? And you only have to say that maybe 3 to 4 times. And then later you just go, really? Are you sure? Is that the choice you're making? Because last time, not great. Or like, because remember the time with the truck or whatever. And then it's like shorthand, like, oh, right. Yeah, I shouldn't mess with my brother. It's really a bummer for both of us. Yeah. But for now, like, the problem is that it's really entertaining to push other people's buttons. It's highly stimulating. It's also like part of being in the lab of life. You're trying to experiment with attention and power. Maybe the 3-year-old is being annoying and they just don't have another way to get away from them. And so they start like messing with them because they can't stand it, So you will also want to explore if there's something that the 5-year-old needs and could ask for sooner, or advocate for and get some help with, instead of coming at their brother. So there's a lot here. That was my version that I could give to you in this shorter form. Priscilla, if you'd like further support, reach out, let me know. You can feel free to go to the website. So the website is www.thecalmempoweredparent.com. Also, you can go to www.vanessacallahan.com. Feel free to grab your guide and to get on my calendar for a complimentary 30-minute strategy session, as well as a chance to take the quiz. So lots of ways to get further support. All right, we're ready for the next one. So Chloe Farmer with a 6 and 8-year-old asks, my child struggles with following through and sticking with something when facing frustration. How do I help my child build resilience? You know why I love this question, because, my company is called Raising Our Resilience. It's exactly what we're here to do. So following through and sticking with something there isn't an easy fix to the frustration and the giving up that can follow. What we can do, though, is we can build our child's sort of perception database, the way that they look at, the way they feel about getting stuck, or getting into a moment of difficulty where there's friction between them and their goal, right? They have to wait in line. This part's trickier than the last part. I can't find the thing that I really need. And when I looked, I didn't find it right away. And now I'm kind of freaking out that I can't find the tool for the job. By the way, this is not just describing what children go through. How many of you are familiar with road rage, or people having tantrums in the grocery line, or perhaps quitting a job because the tools weren't there when they expected them to be? All kinds of ways that we can sort of give up and quit and throw our towel in. Now, I don't want to make all of that wrong, though. It's a very natural response. It's just that with kids, oftentimes the emotional reaction is reasonable given their limited life experience and the limited knowledge base. So oftentimes what parents will accidentally do is we'll make the emotion wrong, when really what needs to happen is we need to teach them how to move through that emotion, and then help them update their perception database, their knowledge base, once they're calm. So 50 to, I'd say 80% of the power struggles that happen around, kids getting frustrated and giving up, is that a parent will too quickly try to update their perspective before they've moved through the emotion. So what I say is, don't fight a feeling. Don't pick an argument with a feeling. Acknowledge that the feeling's here, acknowledge something that makes sense about it. This is emotion coaching, by the way, a tool that I put at the top of the list for all of my clients for a reason. You find one thing that makes sense about it. Oh, well, no wonder you're frustrated. You were ready to move on to the next step and you couldn't find the right tool. And you thought you left it right there and it was gone. Well, that is frustrating when you're looking for something you need and it's not there where you expected it to be. Notice how I didn't immediately give them advice. I even had a dramatic pause. Let them complain back to you. Yeah, I can't believe it wasn't there. This kid sucks or something, whatever they need to say. Let them get it off their chest. Say like, oh, I understand how you'd feel that way. And just give them a moment to feel the feeling. Because here's what I know, especially about frustration, annoyance, anger, rage, all of it, really anger really wants to be seen and heard and really wants to have some sort of action happen. So with anger in particular, you might take some action. I would just move towards a more constructive action. Like, why don't we put this kit down for 10 minutes? We'll set a timer, right? It's not give up. Set a time. Let's take some space from this kit for 10 minutes and let's go do something that's, really enjoyable and see if we can then kind of gather ourselves and come back and see if we can't find this tool together, right? I'm here to help you. That is such a reassuring message. Also, it helps that activated anger know that action is going to be taken to address the root of the frustration. And then later, this is where the learning happens. Well, first of all, they learned how to manage the emotion from you. Check. But the learning around updating their perception database around what is possible with kits and tools and missing tools and what you can do about it is that you can try to put it into some perspective, right? Do you enjoy this activity? Yeah. What do you enjoy about it? Right. And help them like say, look, I like tinkering. I like figuring it out. I'm thinking 7, 6, 7, 8-year-olds, right? It's really satisfying when it's done. I get to add it to my collection. I feel proud, right? So help them tap into the things that make this activity worthwhile. That alone can help move them towards motivation again, right? There's something that is good enough about this activity that they actually enjoy it. Or they can discover a preference, which is nothing's good about this activity. I've always hated these things. I don't know why I keep wanting to do it. And you can start to say, I wonder if there's a totally different activity that we need to do or a different approach to this activity that would make it feel less awful. And then you can start getting into some like what I would call competence hacks in my motivation model that I love to teach to parents, where we look at, okay, can we break this down into smaller steps? Should we take a different approach? Like maybe I start and you watch. Maybe we need to read the instructions more thoroughly, right? Maybe we need to get more organized about where we put our tools and actually get something that like a physical thing that's going to help us to keep it organized, right? I've been with a lot of creatives in my life in different capacities, whether it's a co-teacher. It seemed like everybody had an art degree for at one point that I was working with. And we had to build systems. And our kids as young as 7, 6, 8, they need systems too. So helping them get tactical and curious about what would make this a more enjoyable experience and more successful, you're going to head into more of a growth mindset space by default. Okay. So there's some of my top ideas without having more information, Chloe. All right. This is Lauren's question. Lauren's a new member of the Facebook group. She asks, how do I know if I'm fostering the best skills for lifelong habits? Chores, cleaning up, creating routines, etc., when I've never taught children before? I love this question because so many of us who come into the role of parenting and caregiving have little to no experience with children. And I always think it's a bit of an unfair gig and a really challenging setup, especially because I noticed for myself, it took minimum 3 months working with, let's say, I think it was 36 kids of all different temperaments from ages like 2.5 to 6.5 to even have basic idea of like what is happening at that developmental age between, 2 and 7. And then it took me probably 3 years before I felt really equipped to handle a group of children alone. And so my heart just goes out to every parent who feels like if they have moments that they're just kind of out of their depth and they will do their best. And that's so admirable. And they'll ask for help and, read things, ask people who have been there before, leaning on peers, or even join a program, work with a mentor, because it's hard to think of another role where the stakes are so high and the outcomes are so important that doesn't have a built-in mentorship program and a cohort and a mentor and a curriculum, and also the grace of like time and space to learn, right? Dedicated time set aside for it. I mean, if you can think of some professions that you just get thrown in the deep end that are as important as raising a human, I'd love to hear what those are. Because imagine, any other thing where like a life depends on you. It's like, it's years of training, typically under close supervision with a ton of support and, a lot of investment of time and energy and even money and, and effort into your education and your development before you're sort of entrusted, right? So I think parents have a tough hill to climb. So what can I say about being sure that you are on the right track? A few signs you're going to look for is that kids tend to, even if you have to start with what's called extrinsic motivation, which might be what we call like carrots and sticks or incentive systems or reward systems or consequences and punishments. You're going to want to look for kids finding what's called intrinsic motivation and kind of graduating from any extrinsic motivators to more intrinsic motivators. Things like, this makes me feel good. I'm proud of my accomplishments. I'm finding something interesting about this. I feel helpful and I'm happy to help, right? This brings me closer to the people in my life. I see myself as growing and this is an opportunity for me to learn something new or to get better at something, right? All of those signs, if they're starting to show up across these daily, like the stuff of daily life that she mentioned, right? Chores, things like cleaning up and creating routines, then you're on the right track. Okay, so that's one sign you're going to look for. The other is that your child is able to critically think through problems when they come up. So we've run out of sandwich bags and we're supposed to be packing lunch. And they, instead of going, Mom, no sandwich bags, right? They start to go look around and see if they can find something else, right? Like wash out a bag that was they just threw out from yesterday. That's not that dirty. Using a grocery bag instead, finding a Tupperware, like going through those critical thinking kind of problem solving steps. That's also another sign you're on the right track. That means that they're engaged and they feel capable and empowered to innovate and be creative, and they're probably a little bit more familiar or even kind of masters of their environment, like they know where things are and how they work and what their options are. And that means you've taken the time, what Jane Nelson from Positive Discipline would say, you've taken time out for training. You've given them the opportunity to watch you do it, to be oriented to their environment. You've shown them what's in these drawers. Maybe you've even, and this is really important, listen to this, okay? Pro tip here, thought out loud in front of them the way that you hope they would think for themselves. So maybe they've seen you go, oh, shoot, I think we're out of sandwich bags or we're out of something, right? I wonder what else we could use that's really similar. Let me check around the kitchen and see what we can find. And they've heard you problem solve out loud and think out loud. Well, kids internalize what we show them, sometimes 10, but up to 100 times more than what we tell them. Why don't you go see if you can find something else in the kitchen? Has a very different impact than if you've actually modeled it and thought out loud in front of them. That goes for a lot of things too. It's not just tactical things. It's also self-management. Like, oh, I'm frustrated right now, right? Like self-emotion coaching. I wonder what I could do. Maybe I need to take a little break and think about something, do something else and come back, right? That could be the other piece, right? Emotion coaching. To be able to talk yourself through a problem is another thing that can help you see that your kids are on track. I had a student, gosh, so many students who would come into my classroom. Where I teach them for 3 years in a 6 to 9 Montessori classroom. And they would come in the first, couple months just in that orientation phase. But if by 10 weeks, I could see them move through the environment, get the things they need, go to the pencil thing and there's no pencils left. And instead of like shouting for me or giving up or running to me, running to a teacher, they knew that they could check like one other spot, ask a peer for an idea, and then even just kind of think through what else could I use instead of a pencil. And then eventually maybe come around to saying to me, Vanessa, I think we don't have enough pencils in the pencil box. was amazing. Like you could see that kind of inner world growing and developing. That's another sign that you're on the right track. And then I'd say, last but not least, they start to ask better quality questions about things. So instead of who took the last pencil, right? In that case, it'd be like, I wonder why we keep running out of pencils, right? Getting inquisitive and feeling like they have like a personal connection to this problem and a personal investment in fixing it. And then also even extending that beyond themselves to the community. Like, wouldn't it be nice if none of us had to look for a pencil and there's always a pencil there? Like, what would that take? Like, and then they start to problem solve. Well, let's make sure there's at least the number of pencils as there are kids. Or maybe another is, we need to clean up the floors better because a lot of pencils are rolling under shelves and we're losing them, right? Like, and they start to really get engaged and ask better questions. That's another sign you're on the right track. And there's all these processes you can put in place, like the thinking out loud, that can lead to more of this critical thinking, actually asking for their input on things. I went and visited one of my clients that was in one of my first cohorts in the Family Foundation's immersion, and they were just lovely. And I was going to actually pick up some Christmas gifts because they make these beautiful salves for like bug bites that are like natural and kid friendly. And her two children were home, and it was such a treat because I had a chance to connect with them. And at first, it was kind of like, oh, new person, I'm not sure, right? She was holding her mom's leg. And then I just kept talking to her mom a bit and would just throw her a little question here and there. And we ended up having like a 45-minute conversation, her daughter and I, and then her brother, her older son came in, both of them under 10, came in, and then we are having this big dialogue. And I was even asking her for recommendations. I was like, I'm thinking about this gift for this person. What do you think? And she's like, well, I know, and she was rising to the occasion. And her mom turned to me and said, this is the most they've ever talked to an adult, like that they don't already know very well. And she goes, maybe it's because you actually treat them like people. And that just really struck me. And I realized that it's true. It took me a while to figure out how to engage like a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old in a conversation that was developmentally appropriate, where I wasn't talking down to them or talking over them, right? And a lot of it had to do with getting into their world a bit, asking them a few questions. And so there's another sign you can have that you're on the right track with your kids is that you do have this like easy conversational flow at least once a day. It doesn't have to be right at pickup. It doesn't have to be on the spot. But at some point in the day, you have this way that you're really understanding each other and really connecting, and you can feel it. And they want to be with you. They want to keep having this connection, and they show an interest in you too, right? That's another sign, and that's at any age, right? But especially once they hit late toddler years, you want to start having that experience with them. And coming back to the first principle, getting into their world and attuning to their emotional and physical needs, as I would add, is one of the fastest way to get in there. So checking in about hunger, checking in about their emotions like anger, loneliness, tiredness. These are things I covered in my second episode of the Calm Empowered Parent podcast, because of how crucial it is for us to show concern and care for their basic needs and have that be the foundation. Like, I'm here and I'm tuning into you and I'm making sure you've got what you need. Yeah. So a lot of thoughts there packed in. Hopefully there's a piece or a gem there that stood out to you. This is from Brittany Williams. Brittany asks, how do we get through to that teenage brain and get on the same page as a family? Well, something you have to understand, everybody, about the teenage brain is that it is going through an incredible amount of reorganization in terms of moodiness and kids having less capacity, maybe even being a little foggy brained, where they seem spaced out, maybe more forgetful, more clumsy, etc. That's kind of what we're talking about with teenage brain. This is what I'm assuming here from the question. There's a lot of compassion you need to build in. And this is a good time for us to get to know the core emotions really well, because there's nothing more that an emotion wants than to be seen, heard, and felt. And if you don't see, hear, and feel it, then they tend to get bigger or louder or cause harm, because you're holding tension and you're maybe even cutting yourself off from support systems that you don't feel have the capacity or are ready to process your emotion with you. I remember in my teenage years feeling very rebellious, but like also from a root of like feeling isolated a bit from the support system that I used to be able to rely on more as a younger kid. And I think it's because the expectations were starting to exceed my ability to meet them. And I was getting overwhelmed, and I was starting to have like chronic stress. And with that was a lot of internalized frustration and anger and sadness and fear. And I don't blame my parents for this, but because they were raised with even more severe models of this, but they had a difficult time processing their emotions. Different flavors for different parents. One of them was sad and depressed a lot. The other one had a hot temper, was angry a lot. The other one was really fearful and controlling a lot. So I didn't really have a strong, like, well-rounded model of a person who could handle all their full range of the core emotions. And so it was actually really helpful, even as an adult, to make sense of, and this might be helpful for you right now, to hear the core messages that emotions have for us. So with mad, angry, frustration, irritation, all the things that kind of fall under the anger umbrella, oftentimes there's something you want, but the situation or the person isn't giving it to you. And that can be like big, like society isn't giving it to you and there's an injustice. Or it could be small, like this key won't open this door and it usually does. And, or someone put my keys somewhere and I can't find them, right? From like small grievances to the big ones. Anger can give us some guidance around something's not right and something needs action. There needs to be some action taken, and I need others to pay attention to this too. So anger is not a negative emotion. It's a difficult emotion. It can be painful and it can do harm if not directed properly, but it's also useful. And I think knowing that core message of I know what I want and the situation or person or thing isn't giving it to me, and that's hard, helps us to be able to empathize with the teenagers and help them process what they're experiencing. So if they say, oh, I can't stand that movie theater. And you're like, well, what's going on? Like, well, there's all these kids there and they're like, in little circles and they're laughing and it's so loud. And you're like, So what is going on here is what I want to know, right? Like this like seems a little bit of a big feeling for just seeing other kids having a good time, right? So I'd say, well, how did it go with your friends when you were there? Because it sounds like there was something you might have wanted that was missing. And like, was it just that it was too loud and you couldn't hear the movie, or was there anything else going on? And so then you start to explore the nuances of their experience, right? And then at some point you go like, it makes sense that you were really irritated because you really cared about the film and a bunch of people didn't, and you didn't get to hear all of it, and you paid money for it. And yeah, you and your best friend were really looking forward to it and didn't get to enjoy it. The other thing that might have come up too, that was like, well, it looks like they're having a lot of fun. And right now you and your best friend are kind of fighting. And so you were surrounded by all these people having a good time and something that you want to have. And you were not only not able to hear the movie, but you weren't really enjoying the time with your friend. And then you were too irritated to really be friendly with them. And gosh, what a tough situation. When you bring in that level of empathy around emotions for the teenage brain, it can be really helpful not only to stay connected with you and feel on the same team, but help them process, help them make sense of it. The other thing I learned from Dr. Lisa D'Amour, who is the author of a lot of great books about girls and adolescents, but particularly she just published The Emotional Lives of Teenagers, and I recommend it to all of my clients who have kids who are starting to show signs of puberty or about to head into that time. So 9, 10, 11. It's a great time to read it. And if your kids are older than that, read it too. If you have adult children, you want to make sense of what happened or what your teenage years were like, read it as well. But one of the examples in the book that I just love is when she talks about how kids will have this sort of disproportionate reaction, but if we give them the opportunity to share it, oftentimes what it'll do is there'll be all this drama of like, oh, my friend did this and the other friend did that. And then the teacher said this. And at times there's actually a real grievance that needs to be addressed. Like, don't get me wrong. But other times you're literally just like a garbage disposal. So she said garbage can or garbage disposal, where they're like dumping out the stuff. You catch it. You're like the garbage catcher. My one of my friends calls it the vomit catcher for each other. We're just having to like let it all out. So you're the catcher of this stuff, and then they go off into their day, and you're like thinking about it all day. Like, oh my gosh, I hope it goes okay with their friend, and hope that teacher is like, like handling the situation better or whatever. And then you pick them up and you go, so how did it go? And they're like, what are you talking about? Well, yeah, with your teacher and your class and with your friend, like, oh, it was fine, and they're like, they've moved on. What they really needed was just to dump it. They need to dump it. So you have to be careful with teenagers too, to you empathize and you connect, but you don't necessarily hold on, because their emotional states, their dramas, their concerns can really change from hour to hour, day to day, week by week. And so the main job you have is to be present, empathize, and keep up as best as you can, and not take it personally when they dump their stuff in your direction and start to take it out on you. Still hold your boundaries around what you need. Let them know that it's not okay to talk to you a certain way, and etc. They need that. They need a reasonable response from the environment, which means that you're not a doormat and you don't walk on eggshells, but also give them a lot more, a wider berth for having feelings, expressing them, and making sense of them. Feel free to come on to the calmempoweredparent.com. You can also submit your own question, and you can also come on to these live sessions. We're doing them on most fourth Mondays of the month at noon Pacific, on YouTube at the Calm Empowered Parent, on Facebook at the Raising Our Resilience Parent Group, and also on Zoom. And you need to go ahead and sign up for our newsletter to get the Zoom information, which you can also do at the calmempoweredparent.com. As we wrap up, remember, there's no one-size-fits-all way to parent. Keep nurturing those strong family bonds and watch resilience bloom in your community. You've got this. And if you found this episode valuable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can also hop over to thecalmempoweredparent.com for current events and to grab your copy of the Calm Parent Strategy Guide. You can even learn how to bring our free and low-cost workshops to your school or community. Your support means the world to us and helps us empower more parents and children. Let's do this together.